I used to believe my life was a picture framed in stability. To the outside world, we were the kind of family that drew admiration, a dependable husband, a growing son, and a home that echoed with warmth. I wore that illusion like a shield, convincing myself I had everything a woman could ask for. My husband, Daniel, was the type of man people described as solid. He provided, he joked with our neighbors, and he always seemed to carry an air of reliability. At family gatherings, he played the role of devoted partner effortlessly, his hand resting on my shoulder, his laughter punctuating every conversation. I was proud of him, proud of us. Then there was Ethan, our son, whose presence filled the house with a kind of joy I thought was unshakable. He had inherited his father's smile, but, thankfully, my curiosity. Every evening, he would ask about my day with an earnestness that reminded me why I endured the hard moments. Ethan was my anchor, and in many ways, my reason for ignoring the cracks I now realize were spreading quietly across the surface of our lives. Those cracks were subtle at first. A late meeting here, an unexplained business trip there. Daniel's phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, became a constant companion he kept face down at the table. I noticed the change, but each time I considered pressing him, I swallowed the words. I told myself, he's tired. He's working hard for us. Don't make a mountain out of nothing. And so I silenced my doubts, burying them under layers of rationalization. Still, there were moments I couldn't shake. Nights when I woke to find the bed empty, only to hear the soft hum of his voice from the downstairs office. He claimed it was work, and I nodded, though unease twisted in my chest. Once, when Ethan asked why Daddy wasn't joining us for dinner, Daniel brushed it off with a smile so polished it felt rehearsed. I smiled too, but inside, something fragile had shifted. I clung to routine, hoping normalcy would steady me. Morning breakfasts, weekend errands, the endless cycle of domestic life. It all became my shield against the gnawing suspicion that something wasn't right. Yet, the more I tried to maintain the rhythm, the more glaring the disruptions became. Daniel's eyes no longer lingered on me. His laughter rang hollow. And though Ethan still filled the air with chatter, I found myself listening less to his stories and more to the silence that settled whenever Daniel entered the room. The illusion was breaking whether I admitted it or not. Deep down, I knew the truth was lurking, waiting for the moment I could no longer ignore it. And that moment arrived sooner than I expected, in the smallest of ways, so ordinary, yet so devastating, that it marked the beginning of the end. It happened on a Tuesday of all days. Ordinary in every sense. The sun streamed through the blinds. Ethan left for school with his backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder, and Daniel kissed my cheek on his way out the door. His touch was quick, distracted, more routine than affection. I remember thinking he doesn't even notice anymore. That evening, while folding laundry in our bedroom, I heard the faint buzz of a phone. Daniel's jacket lay crumpled on the chair, his phone sliding halfway out of the pocket. I wasn't searching, not really, but when the screen lit up, the name glowing across the display froze me. It wasn't one I recognized. And worse, the message preview left no room for innocence. Last night was unforgettable. I can't wait until we're alone again. My body went rigid. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air felt too heavy, pressing against my chest as though the room itself had conspired to suffocate me. My hands trembled so violently I dropped the shirt I'd been holding. The sound was louder than it should have been, like a thunderclap in a stormless sky. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I told myself it could be a misunderstanding, a wrong number, some elaborate mistake. But the words on that screen burned away every fragile excuse I'd been clinging to. I picked up the phone, and, against my better judgment, I unlocked it. What I found erased any doubt. Thread after thread of messages stretched before me, intimate, playful, filled with confessions no married man should be making to another woman. They spoke of stolen weekends, of lies told to me so they could be together, of plans for a future that excluded me entirely. My stomach churned as though I'd swallowed poison. Each message was a blade, slicing away the illusion I had worked so hard to preserve. By the time Daniel walked through the door, my world was already shattered. I sat at the kitchen table, his phone clutched in my hand, my heart pounding so hard I feared Ethan could hear it from his room. Daniel froze when he saw me. For the first time in years, I saw fear flicker across his face. "What is this?" My voice cracked, but I forced the words out, lifting the phone like a weapon. He hesitated only a second before slipping into a familiar mask.
"You don't understand."
"It's not what it looks like." The words were rehearsed, hollow, and they ignited something inside me I didn't know I carried. "Not what it looks like?" I whispered, my throat raw. "Then explain the weekends. The late nights. The promises." His denial crumbled quickly, replaced by excuses, half-truths, and finally silence. A silence that said more than words ever could. I looked at him then. Not the man I had married, but a stranger who had been living beside me, lying with every breath. That night marked the end of the life I thought I knew. And though I didn't realize it yet, the betrayal reached further than I imagined, threatening not only my marriage, but the bond one cherished most with my son. The days that followed blurred into one long, suffocating silence. Meals were eaten without conversation, the clinking of cutlery replacing what used to be laughter. I moved through the house like a ghost, my body present, but my spirit somewhere far away. Daniel tried, at first, to pretend nothing had changed. He carried on with forced cheerfulness, making small talk, asking about bills, suggesting a family outing as though we hadn't just set fire to the foundation of our lives. But I couldn't pretend. Every time I looked at him, I saw the words I had read on his phone, etched into my memory like scars I couldn't erase. The simple act of sitting across from him at the dinner table made my chest ache. Trust, once the invisible glue binding us, had crumbled into dust, and I was left choking on the remains. Ethan sensed it almost immediately. Children always do. He asked me one night, while brushing his teeth, why I looked so sad. I forced a smile, but his eyes narrowed in the way only a child's can, sharp and knowing. I wanted to protect him from the truth, but protection requires strength, and mine was slipping through my fingers. Then came the moment that broke me further. Ethan, sitting on the edge of his bed, said quietly, "Mom, I heard Dad on the phone last night. He said he loved someone else." The innocence in his voice cut deeper than any message I had read. My son had overheard the betrayal, had carried it silently until he couldn't anymore. In that instant, I realized the affair hadn't only poisoned my marriage, it had seeped into the bond between father and son, staining something pure. I wanted to rage, to scream at Daniel for stealing not just my trust but also Ethan's sense of safety. Yet when I confronted him again, he folded into silence, offering no apologies strong enough to mend what he had destroyed. His eyes were hollow, as though he had already chosen another life and was only biding his time before stepping fully into it. Nights became unbearable. Sleep eluded me, replaced by endless spirals of thought. I replayed our years together, searching for the moment the fracture began. Was it one careless decision? Or had he been dismantling us piece by piece while I busied myself with laundry, meals, and Ethan's homework? The not knowing was its own form of torture. I grew weaker, physically and emotionally. My body, once steady and routine, now betrayed me too. Meals went untouched. The mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized, hollow-eyed, shoulders slumped, a stranger shaped by sorrow. More than once, I caught Ethan watching me, with worry far beyond his years. That look alone nearly broke me. I couldn't walk through life as though nothing had happened. I couldn't pretend for Ethan's sake, for my own sake. The weight of betrayal was crushing, and I had reached a point where standing still was no longer an option. Something had to change. And so, on a night heavy with silence, I whispered to myself the truth I had been avoiding. I had to make a choice, one that would end the life I once knew, but perhaps save the one I had left. The morning after my whispered confession to myself, I woke with clarity sharper than pain. For weeks, I had been drowning in betrayal, but now I understood something simple. I couldn't stay where I was and expect to heal. Survival meant moving forward, no matter how jagged the path ahead. I began quietly. A folder of important documents appeared on my nightstand: birth certificates, financial records, anything that tied my life to Daniel's. Each paper I tucked away felt like a small act of defiance, proof that I was preparing for a future without him. I opened a separate bank account. I called a lawyer. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting to Daniel's choices. I was making my own. When the day came, it was both devastating and liberating. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, suitcase at my feet, and told him plainly, "I'm leaving." Daniel's expression flickered from disbelief to anger to something resembling regret, but it didn't matter anymore. His words, once able to bend my resolve, now slid past me like shadows. I walked away not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much about myself and my son to stay. The first weeks were brutal. Loneliness became my unwelcome companion, whispering doubts in the quiet hours of the night. But in those same hours, I also rediscovered myself. I began journaling, pouring every unspoken thought onto paper until the weight lifted, if only slightly. I cooked meals Ethan loved, not because I had to, but because I wanted to see him smile again. I forced myself out for walks, each step reminding me that my legs could still carry me forward, even if my heart lagged behind. Slowly, I stitched together a version of myself that had been lost under years of compromise. Therapy gave me tools to process the betrayal, but more importantly, it reminded me that my worth was not tied to Daniel's choices. Friends I had drifted from re-entered my life, offering support without judgment. I leaned into their kindness, allowing it to soften the sharp edges of my grief. Ethan, too, began to heal. With Daniel no longer shadowing our every moment, our home grew lighter, freer. We talked openly even about the hard things. One evening, he looked at me and said, "Mom, you seem happier now." His words were simple, but they anchored me more firmly than anything else. Looking back, I see the betrayal not only as an ending, but as a brutal unveiling. It tore apart the illusion I had been clinging to, forcing me to confront a reality I would have otherwise ignored. And though it left scars, it also left strength I never would have discovered if I hadn't been broken first. To anyone standing where I once stood, know this: betrayal does not define you. It may shake your world, but it cannot erase your worth. You are not what was done to you. You are what you choose to become afterward. And me? I chose to rise.